Now, I would like to resume our discussions. Now, we can move to sub-item 4C to discuss issues related to the follow-up of already inscribed elements. Mr. Secretary, please explain to us the main issues related to this reflection theme.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Indeed, this is an important item and with a number of issues, so if you'll bear with me, I'll take a little bit of time to explain some of the points by first reminding the working group that the committee was very clear in wanting the issues related to the follow-up of inscribed elements included as part of the global reflection on the listing system. And this can be seen in its decisions 13.9 as well as decision 15.7. As to the monitoring, decision 13.9 in its paragraph 5 indicates the need to enhance the follow-up mechanisms that would allow the participation of communities, groups, and where applicable individuals in the monitoring of inscribed elements. Decision 15.7 in its paragraph 6 shows the committee's readiness to discuss the possibility of restricting the evaluation of new nomination files if the reporting duties concerning already inscribed elements have not been fulfilled by states parties. The committee also took a series of decisions, notably decisions 10.19, 12.14, and 14.14, to stress the need to clarify the procedures for removal of an element from a list, as well as the transfer from one list to the other. I will try once again to summarize now what the so-called fine-tuning as well as the repositioning approaches may look like as regards the follow-up of inscribed elements. First of all, there are two issues that are common to both approaches, and that is the proposal to create an arm's-length online platform of intangible cultural heritage. And perhaps here, if I may, Mr. Chair, just to address that, there were some discussions earlier where it was called an arm's-length body. And there was some idea that this was somehow involved in the evaluation of nominations, but the proposal for the experts who referred to it as an observatory, which we then refer to as an arm's-length online platform, is not associated with as an evaluation body or with the process of inscription, but is proposed here in the context of follow-up. And this arm's-length online platform of intangible cultural heritage would serve as a space to address issues in the follow-up of inscribed elements before they be passed on to formal statutory mechanisms. The other proposal that concerns both approaches is that a more direct and systematic support should be provided, and particularly from the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund, towards elements that would have been transferred from the representative list to the urgent safeguarding list. And in that, I ask you to kindly refer to paragraph 14 of the working document 3 for more details. So coming back to our two approaches, the fine-tuning approach would seek to improve the current system by making full use of the periodic reporting mechanism and international assistance. For example, a request for transfer might follow the periodicity established for reporting every 4 years in the case of elements inscribed on the urgent safeguarding list, and every 6 years for those inscribed on the representative list. One aspect then of the repositioning approach that you can find in the document would be that no element would remain on the urgent safeguarding list for more than 4 cycles of reporting. That means 16 years. Elements on the urgent safeguarding list would undergo a monitoring process 16 years after the inscription, and depending on the outcome of this exercise, would either be proposed for transfer to the representative list because the viability has been sufficiently restored, or removed altogether from the urgent safeguarding list. This would be a mean to try to ensure that safeguarding plans are indeed implemented expeditiously. For the representative list, this approach could also involve what we discussed earlier, the sunset clause on the period during which elements are included on that list, but after which the elements would move to a pantheon or a hall of fame for posterity, but without any more reporting duties. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Now, I would like to open the floor for opinions of the state parties. So please raise your hand to make comments. As you remember, as you might recall, one of the priority items for discussion in this area would be the transfer from one list to another, or the removal from a list. That issue, the item that I classified as priority is included here. So included that point, I would like to open the floor now for your interventions. Okay, I'd like to start with Switzerland to be followed by Poland. Switzerland, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues. L'enjeu du suivi des éléments inscrits est une problématique transversale de notre Convention. Nous sommes en faveur des propositions, mécanismes et méthodologies visant à améliorer le suivi des éléments inscrits, par exemple par la mise en place d'une plateforme. Pour le transfert d'un élément, nous pouvons considérer en principe 3 options, une forme d'automatisme, une procédure simplifiée ou une demande ordinaire. Nous sommes ouverts à considérer les 3 options. Par contre, le retrait d'un élément nécessite un mécanisme plus élaboré, requérant à la fois des bases réglementaires et un processus de décision clair. Le thème central de cette section thématique est la clause de la durée limitée de l'inscription des éléments, la Sunset Clause. Les explications et justifications reçues à ce stade ne nous apparaissent pas suffisantes pour instaurer cette clause. Nous n'avons pas l'impression que cela diminuerait significativement la charge de travail pour le suivi de ces éléments. L'idée de Panthéon ou Hall of Fame suscite chez nous une impression d'enterrement royal ou d'entrepôt de luxe pour ces traditions. Ceci d'autant plus si ce statut n'est pas lié à des obligations de monitorage. Le terme même impliquerait une sorte de hiérarchisation qui contredit à l'esprit de la Convention. De plus, il nous semble délicat et potentiellement contre-productif de sortir des éléments que les communautés ont proposés et se sont engagées à sauvegarder en contrepartie d'une certaine visibilité. Nous souhaitons revenir encore sur un autre point, la proposition 15C, qui soulève la question de la priorité pour l'examen des dossiers. Avec la question du plafond, celle des priorités constitue un point à considérer avec attention au vu des débats lors des dernières sessions de l'Assemblée générale et du comité. Dans cette perspective, il nous semble que la proposition de lier la priorité d'examen des dossiers au fait que les États parties aient rempli leurs obligations statutaires est une bonne base de départ. Il nous semble que cette question va toutefois au-delà des présentes discussions et nous proposons d'instituer, à l'instar de ce qui est suggéré pour l'article 18, un groupe de travail séparé et distinct pour traiter ces enjeux. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Now, Poland to be followed by Colombia. Poland, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. We would like also to position underline our position regarding the transfer and the removal of one element from one list to another and removal from any of the listing mechanisms. We believe that we need a very clear procedure for these situations that are currently lacking in the system. And with the first principle being the involvement of the communities in the ground, we believe that both situation, transfer and removal, are quite fragile for communities. And here, in the case of the transfer, the advisory mission could be an element helpful for the communities and for the states parties. And this is also proposed in the report of group number 2. And when it comes to the removal, we also believe that the reconciliatory potential and educational potential of the convention might be better introduced and used in the form of interim measures that will help to take more informed decision, and after time for reflection for sides that feel that the element concerned does not fulfill any more aims, values, and objectives of the convention, as well as for the communities concerned. And here there is an idea introduced also by the experts to provide consultative mission in the field that will also help to assess the situation and evaluate the situation happening on the ground. So we would be happy to hear more positions of other states parties regarding these two processes, and that is transfer and the removal, and the procedures that will be found satisfactory for all stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, before moving further, let me just draw attention to what Mr. Curtis said earlier. This is about the arm's length platform. This is also one issue that we wanted to discuss, and this is particularly relevant to the already inscribed element, the follow-up process of the already inscribed elements. And I would appreciate if delegations can also make a reference to that point as well. Having said that, now I would like to give the floor to Colombia, to be followed by the Netherlands. Colombia, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And actually, my first question was regarding the arm's length online platform, because although I think it can be a good idea, but I don't understand. I think we need more clarifications, because we have to see in reality who it will benefit and who will administrate it. And if we want it to be very inclusive, it will need maybe translations to other languages. Who will do this what's okay, I'm having a language problem. The follow-up or the actualizations on the page, so it will be in all the languages, and so it doesn't become only for English and French speakers. If we want to be inclusive, how can we do that? I have some questions about it, and then in that sense, who it will be really serving this tool. So from the idea to the implementation, I would like to see how real it could be, if maybe the secretary can give us more clarification. Also regarding the fine-tuning options, I believe the 8 years of urgent safeguarding list is a good idea to be more dynamic about the actions of safeguarding that we have to do in urgent cases. In the 15B, I would like some clarification about how this methodology in the removal and transferring the framework of periodic reporting will be carried out. I don't think it's that easy, or who will decide, or if the idea is actually that each state party with the communities propose it, but I don't see clearly how it can work. And regarding the repositioning option, the 16A, I would like to know, in some cases, and it's actually very sad, there are some elements that are just kind of fading away sometimes, and that happens a lot with, for example, some languages or other examples. And so it would be important to consider how these safeguarding measures can also provide some memory options or some recording options, or how, because some of them maybe will go out of the safeguarding list, but not necessarily because you didn't do enough measures to safeguard it, but just because it is like that sometimes. And finally, regarding the removal of the elements, I also believe, as some colleague previously said, that the interim measures are very important because we all know about the element that was removed from the list. It was a very difficult decision. I think it's a very good exercise to take into account to this proposal, but I really believe that this kind of second choices or something more friendly can be done in this sense. So this is a nice proposal. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, for the benefit of discussions, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Curtis to clarify this arm's length platform.
Okay, I thank you, Mr. Chair. I think clarify to a certain degree, beyond which I think it requires more discussions. In fact, the initial wording of the expert group concerned was an observatory, but when we translated, it was clear that this observatory was supposed to also play a role in the follow-up of inscribed elements. And in that sense, it was beyond just a clearinghouse function, which seems to be the usual role of observatories, and we looked a little bit at the UNESCO observatories. So we at the Secretariat took the liberty of, and we discussed briefly at the end of the expert meeting an exchange with the group, recalling it an arm's length online platform. Again, to clarify this in relation to earlier comments, I don't believe the group ever intended this to be an evaluating body, but a forum for, as far as I understood it, discussing issues that would help the monitoring and the follow-up of inscribed elements, including by allowing communities to engage and liaise. Indeed, the core questions also from our side is, how is it administered? Who gets access to it? How is it maintained? Whose voices are heard on this? But those things are feasible if the will is there to create one, and then the details have to be looked at in terms of the resources available, for example, under the fund, and the running of the platform. Now, that was our understanding of the points raised by the experts, and of course we have a stake as a secretariat because someone will have to set it up and run it. And in that sense, there are real, but not insurmountable, I don't believe, issues to be talked about in terms of finances and administration. Perhaps in the first point, might be useful to understand the role and the composition, and if the role of this online platform, arm's length body, observatory, although we felt that observatory was more limiting than what was being proposed. If that role is cleared, and if that role is identified, then efforts can be made to discuss and find the running and the administering of it. That's what I would comment on, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Now I would like to go back to the list of speakers. Now Netherlands to be followed by Kuwait. Netherlands, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Netherlands agrees with the suggestion of limiting the number of years on the urgent safeguarding list, and we also agree with the transferal to the representative list and the register. We feel reporting obligations should, as much as possible, be incorporated in the periodic reporting. And with respect to the follow-up of inscribed elements, the Netherlands thinks that technical and financial support from the fund of the convention to elements that need to be transferred from the representative list to the urgent safeguarding list to be safeguarded is a valuable suggestion as well. And we also had a question with respect to the arm's length platform on top of the explanations that we just received. We were wondering what the status of the platform would be in the function of the whole listing mechanisms. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Kuwait to be followed by Japan. Kuwait, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the issues related to the follow-up of inscribed elements, Kuwait thinks from the concept, the arm's length is a very good concept, yet we need to know the modality, and that's, things can to be worked out more in details. But from the concept, we think it's a good idea to have this platform. Second point I'd like to mention, regarding this issue, we are more in favor, the repositioning approach in this item. But yet, in the delisting, I think the delisting, as our colleagues from Colombia said, we had an experience from our last or the meeting in Colombia. It's not a black and white issue, the delisting. I think the delisting, sometimes it's clear, but sometimes it has to be more investigated. So I think in that sense, we need to be more dynamics. The modality of it, if it's very clear, we could get the recommendation from the secretariats, is, the convention that was not met, and it's the same time as what's happened before, and the decision could be quickly. In scenarios where it's more in the gray area, we need more from the experts' point of view. I think we should have we should have, as a committee, should have the option where they can go back to the experts and get their point of view from the delisting. So to summarize, the delisting should be dynamic, where it's clear point. We have the clear point. We can delist. We get report from the secretariats. It's a very clear, and the committee can take that in charge. If it's needed to be more in the expert, they can go back to the expert and give a report for the delisting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Now Japan, to be followed by Austria. Japan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the transfer of items, we think that to make the transfer for an item from a list to another by utilizing periodic reports is a valuable proposition, although it still needs to be concrete, as Colombia said. We also think that the proposition to have a process to remove or transfer after 16 years the element from the urgent safeguarding list is also an interesting proposal. Concerning the sunset clause of the representative list, we believe that we need more careful and detailed discussion on if it will be a good idea to move the inscribed element to a so-called Hall of Fame. So we still have to really discuss what it means. We are in the favor of the AMLENS online platform. And as Mr. Curtis and the Secretary said, we're still wondering how the finance is going to be, but it could be a discussion which is going to be more in detail when the platform gets concrete. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Austria, to be followed by Senegal. Austria, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We consider this topic as a central one in our reflection process. Establishing a monitoring system is an urgent issue for both the representative list and the urgent safeguarding list. As we know, presently, even when a state party does not submit the obligatory periodic report, this does not affect the inscriptions on the list. It seems desirable to establish a monitoring mechanism for inscribed elements in order to evaluate the effectiveness of inscribed elements in terms of successful safeguarding. We also support the proposal of restricting the evaluation of new nomination files if the reporting duties concerning already inscribed elements have not been fulfilled by state parties. But as Switzerland has suggested, we might need another working group to discuss these delicate issues in greater detail. Furthermore, we are in favor of establishing separate, clear and specific procedures and criteria for the removal of an element from a list and the transfer of an element from one list to another. The proposed way of using an arm's-length online platform of intangible cultural heritage is an interesting idea when communities themselves are involved in monitoring. However, some questions, clarifications still have to be addressed, as pointed out by Colombia, Netherlands, and also the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Senegal, to be followed by Brazil. Senegal, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. En ce qui concerne la plateforme indépendante qui servirait de forum, je pense que l'idée est tout à fait salutaire. En effet, si des acteurs culturels ou alors des ONG ou alors des chaires d'université, des académiciens s'intéressent au patrimoine immatériel, travaillent sur le terrain sur le patrimoine immatériel, sont donc proches des communautés et voient un peu comment vivent les éléments qui sont inscrits. Je pense que pour le suivi, leur avis doit être important. Et je pense que donc cette plateforme leur offrirait toute la possibilité d'échanger. Je donne juste un exemple. Nous avons procédé à la restitution de l'inventaire pilote que nous avons effectué au Sénégal avec l'UNESCO et nous avons publié sur notre plateforme la liste représentative de 59 éléments issus de cet inventaire. Ça a soulevé un débat national sur cette plateforme. Et on a pu remarquer que dans les communautés, en réalité, ce n'est pas uniquement les praticiens. Au niveau de ces communautés, il y a des gens qui sont issus de ces communautés, qui sont des universitaires, qui sont des médecins, et qui avaient également, qui sont imbus des valeurs de cet élément et qui peuvent donc se prononcer. Et ça a été très intéressant, ce débat se continue et on a envisagé pour la mise à jour de ces listes un inventaire complémentaire, bien sûr, et c'est pourquoi je pense que cette plateforme est importante sur les éléments déjà inscrits sur la liste. Sur la question maintenant du retrait ou alors du transfert, je suis d'accord avec les autres, il faut des procédures précises, c'est clair. Mais il me paraît important de dire ceci. Quand on inscrit un élément sur la liste du patrimoine, sur la liste sauvegarde, c'est parce que cet élément avait besoin de mesures spécifiques de sauvegarde pour retrouver sa vitalité, pour retrouver sa viabilité. Si au bout d'un certain temps, cela n'est pas possible, d'une manière ou d'une autre, et que les évaluations d'experts permettent de dire que cet élément, si vous voulez, n'a pas retrouvé sa viabilité, ne répond pas toujours au principe de la Convention, moi je pense qu'il faut délister. Un élément ne peut pas rester éternellement dans la liste de sauvegarde. Et donc, moi, je pense que la limitation, on a dit 16 ans, peut-être qu'on peut en rediscuter pour voir une autre périodicité, une autre durée, mais je suis d'avis qu'il faut effectivement arrêter, si vous voulez, une durée de vie de ces éléments dans la liste de sauvegarde. Sinon, vraiment, c'est impossible. Je vous remercie, Président.
Thank you very much. Now Brazil to be followed by Poland. Brazil, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, nous manifestons, suivant votre gentille invitation, parce que nous savons que c'est important pour le secrétariat et pour le comité aussi d'avoir une indication de quelle est l'opinion générale des États. Mais nous le faisons bien sûr d'une manière indicative, d'une manière en principe, parce que, comme a été déjà dit, nous avons besoin de plus d'informations. Nous aurions idéalement besoin de travailler sur un texte, sur des propositions plus concrètes. Bien sûr, oui à une mobilité entre les listes, oui à pouvoir retirer un élément de la liste. Bon, nous savons déjà ce qu'on a eu pendant la réunion du comité à Bogota, quand le problème s'est présenté. Donc, il y a des situations auxquelles il faut être prêt. En principe, donc, bien sûr, oui, à l'idée aussi qu'un élément ne devrait pas rester éternellement dans la liste de sauvegarde, parce que ça signifierait que cet élément n'est pas en train de recevoir les mesures de protection dont il a besoin. Donc, en principe, oui à toutes ces idées, mais c'est important à partir d'ici de travailler sur des propositions concrètes et voir vraiment quelles sont les idées. Aussi pour pouvoir en parler, en discuter avec nos instituts du patrimoine et avoir un débat plus complet. L'idée de l'observatoire nous semble une idée excellente. C'est très important d'avoir la possibilité d'un contact direct avec la communauté et cette possibilité avoir de réponses immédiates ou presque. Donc aussi, dans ces cas-là, oui, à cette idée, à cette initiative, ce serait très intéressant de la voir implémentée. Mais je réaffirme, c'est important de recevoir des détails, plus d'informations. L'idée de cette première manifestation de position, c'est justement d'indiquer au secrétariat et au comité le chemin à parcourir, une manière de commencer à travailler. Merci.
Thank you. Now, Poland to be followed by Sweden. Poland, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry for taking the floor for the second time, but I would like to make clear our position on the observatory. We would like to support this idea, and we believe that such a platform that will help to embrace diversity of actors that are not heard now in the system is very much needed, a plural and open platform for sharing different issues that due to different obstacles, lack of time, lack of procedures, cannot be handled during regular meetings of organs. So such a platform would definitely fulfill these needs to maintain the dialogue and to open up the possibility for the communities to take the floor and to sit at the table and not only be on the table, as the old diplomatic anecdote says. So recalling this anecdote, I would also like to underline the issue regarding the procedures on transfer or removal. Though there is a need to be able to take the decision quickly and in a dynamic way, we always need to take into account the emotions and the feelings and the identities of communities that are on the ground. And I believe that the process needs time, and this time invested in the process of understanding of what is in the field, of introducing reconciliatory measures might bring more benefits than just fast-track decision to delete an element from the list. This will be an educational asset of the convention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Sweden to be followed by China. Sweden, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding follow-up, we would like to stress that since intangible cultural heritage is ever-changing, continued reporting is needed. This is also an obligation for states when ratifying the convention. We would support the priority for examination of nomination files might be lowered for state parties that have failed to fulfill different reporting obligations under the convention. A clear and simple process regarding transfer between lists would be welcome, but we want to underline that the criteria for inscriptions still apply for an element that would be transferred. On the arm's length platform, we agree with Colombia and others. This could be a good idea. Indeed, as Poland also just said, we support engagement and inclusion of diverse voices. And we think that we thank the Secretariat for their explanations, but still we would need some more clarifications on this, especially since resources are limited. Regarding a sunset clause and a so-called Hall of Fame, we are a bit hesitant and agree with the points made by Switzerland on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, China to be followed by Estonia. China, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have, according to our understanding, the imbalance between the elements inscribed among the lists has always been of great concern, and particularly the fact that there are less elements inscribed on the urgency list than on the representative list. it is our common, we believe it is our common understanding that the urgent safeguarding list deserve more attention because the elements inscribed on this list is in need of urgent safeguarding. And so our delegation is in favor of the proposal to turn the urgent safeguarding list to a dynamic and ongoing list instead of a static list, which means that elements inscribed on this list doesn't necessarily mean that it will be listed permanently, because we think it does not apply to the features of those elements in need of urgent safeguarding efforts. So for this purpose, we would suggest first to optimize the current nomination form to reduce the complexity and the difficulty to fulfill the fulfill the forms and the preparation of the nomination. And second, to introduce the assessment system based on the quadriennial periodic reports of the urgent safeguarding list elements. So if after 3 or 4 reports, according to the assessment, the elements inscribed on this urgent safeguarding list do have improved its viability, and then it will be encouraged to transfer to the representative list. Of course, with the prior, free, and informed consent of the communities concerned. And we believe that favorable measures or mechanisms should be drafted in order to facilitate the transfer from the urgent safeguarding list to the representative list. If the assessment do believe that the element does not have any improvement on its viability to maintain its continuous practice or transmission, then it will be removed from this list, because cases do exist that elements no longer respond to the environment and the modern society. So, and the third, we would like to suggest that to set up one of the item on the agenda of the session of the committee to have to facilitate the discussion on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Now, Estonia to be followed by Portugal. Estonia, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Estonia would like to join the other speakers in advocating for clear procedures regarding the transfer and removal of the elements. But I would like to comment on paragraph 16 A, that proposes a system by which no element would remain on the urgent safeguarding list for more than 16 years. And after this period, there is a monitoring process, and depending on the outcome, then the decision is taken. But I would like to raise the question of what will happen if a monitoring process finds that the criteria for the urgent safeguarding list are still met. I mean, what would be the message for the communities and for the state party if we simply decide that as this time has passed and that the criteria for the representative list concerning this element are not met, that they should also be removed from the urgent safeguarding list? I mean, I believe it's a very, very delicate situation indeed. And although 16 years may seem like a long time, we need to take into account that that intangible heritage is something that is passed down from generation to generation. It's not there for these certain cycles. Of course, if a monitoring system will find that the criteria are not met for the urgent safeguarding list, that would be one matter. But what if the criteria for this list are still met? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, now I give the floor to Portugal to be followed by Belgium. Portugal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, along the line of many other previous speakers, we also believe that inscription in the urgent safeguarding list should not be a permanent listed element. On the other hand, and connecting this with this notion of Hall of Fame, we do not believe that this should be the same for the representative list, meaning that there should be no limit period for an element to be included in the representative list. We also agree with both approaches in the sense that this transfer of elements should be linked to reporting, the periodic reporting, and in the case of urgent safeguarding list elements, to the international assistance that should be provided during the process. On the arm's length platform or observatory, we find the idea interesting. We would like to have it a little bit more clear, maybe from Mr. Curtis, on if this proposed forum would be in any way linked to the transfer, removal processes and procedures. That will be all from us on this point for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Belgium, please.
Oui, bonjour à tous, Monsieur le Président, merci de nous donner la parole. Bien sûr, en Belgique, on est particulièrement conscient de la nécessité de mettre en place des procédures de suivi et de transfert dynamique des listes l'une par rapport à l'autre. Et je voulais surtout intervenir ici par rapport notamment et rebondir ce qu'avait dit notre collègue de Chine, par rapport à l'importance des rapports périodiques dans lesquels, finalement, on interroge les communautés patrimoniales sur la manière dont ils ont mis en œuvre la Convention et dont ils appréhendent les inscriptions, mais on ne leur demande pas finalement s'ils désirent se réengager pour les 6 années à venir dans finalement dans cette grande communauté que forme le patrimoine immatériel au niveau mondial. Et donc, je pense que le rapport périodique est un bon outil pour faire le point sur ces questions, pour voir si les communautés patrimoniales veulent se réengager, si elles souscrivent aux règles éthiques et aux recommandations de la Convention. Et de même, on veut m'interroger aussi sur le fait que les meilleures pratiques dans les rapports périodiques ne sont pratiquement pas mises en avant, alors que ce sont normalement les modèles qui devraient servir aux autres. Et donc, faire rapport également sur les meilleures pratiques me semble indispensable, puisqu'il est intéressant de savoir si ce qui a été jugé exemplaire à une certaine période le reste dans le temps, ou est-ce que finalement ces éléments ne deviennent plus des bonnes pratiques. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much. Since I don't recognize any hand raised at this moment, can I give the floor to Mr. Curtis?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there was questions again about whether it's an observatory or an arm's length platform. And the question from Portugal was really whether they are related in any way to the process of removal and transferring. And I understand that, yes, that would be the point. Otherwise, we are just in a classic UNESCO observatory, but it wouldn't need to come under this discussion. So my understanding of the proposal from the expert group, and something that some of you find interesting, and I think we have found it interesting, is that it provides a space to explore the issues and dialogue on the issues of transfer, on this viability, and would need to find some way of connecting then to the formal mechanisms. And that is why, in our opinion, it's more than just an observatory. It's a networking for inscribed elements. Maybe that's one of the other issues, but that could serve some kind of function. Now, the details of this are not sorted out, and they would require discussion. But in terms of evaluating if we have an evaluation body that's already clearly overloaded with just the inscriptions, where does the space for the follow-up happen? And if we want the communities to have the voice in the follow-up, this could be a solution. But in this case, it's not just an observatory in the classic sense of a UNESCO observatory. It is becoming a so-called arm's length body, which would be able to inform us in the Secretariat, as well as the committee, as well as potentially the evaluation body, on the evolving status of the viability of certain elements or issues related to those elements. This is how we understand it fitting into this process here. It is something that doesn't exist, as far as I know, clearly well, it's quite different to the process than the 1972. It's early stages yet, as I said, there are many implications, but we feel that putting the discussion on the table would be important to explore the possibilities. So it appears here in the follow-up of an inscribed element. It also appears in the overall 5 issues of enhancing community engagement with the life of the convention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Curtis. Now, I understand that Ambassador Munir is asking for the floor, but he has some problems in the function of raise hand. Okay, is he trying to reconnect? Okay. Okay, I was told that he's not connected yet, but he's okay. I recognize Norway, so maybe I'll give the floor to Norway with the understanding that I want to give the floor to Palestine at a later stage. Norway, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say that Norway supports the suggested platform for stakeholders to share information on monitoring on safeguarding plans and safeguarding methods. Further, we support the proposal of making it possible to transfer elements from urgent safeguarding list and the representative list also to the register. This mechanism could encourage development and sharing of good safeguarding methods. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We still don't have Palestine online. Okay, while we are trying, let me just summarize the discussion so far, and perhaps we can have further discussions on that basis. First of all, there were a lot of discussions about the transfer and removal, and then in case of removal, it was clear that everybody wanted to have a very cautious approach. It needs certain time, it needs clear procedure, it might probably need interim process, and this has to be a very dynamic process. So, everybody recognizes the need to a certain extent, because you cannot be in the safeguarding list forever. But at the same time, as expected and quite naturally, many delegations want to have a very cautious approach to that. On the other hand, on the issues of transfer from one list to another, there are more flexibilities, and simplification of the process may enjoy more support, and perhaps more constructive approach would be possible, and arm's length platform can be used for that purpose. So there have been a series of suggestions for the transfer process. Now, on the question of arm's length platform, I did not see any voice saying that this is a stupid idea. So everybody finds this suggestion interesting, and perhaps they need to have more information, they need to have more clarification on this. But if this arm's length platform involves communities, that would be a very important platform. So everybody sees the value there, but naturally that also needs a little bit more clarification in terms of what kind of functions this is going to shoulder. Now, there was a reference to the periodic reporting, and everybody emphasized the importance of periodic reporting. I think the voices were more or less identical in this regard. But at the same time, the question of sunset, we heard many questions, many doubts about this system of sunset. But nonetheless, I think there are, this also requires some more discussions. Now, well, I'm sure that there are some other things, but those are the brief, very generic summary of what the discussions are all about. And on the basis of those observations, I would like to solicit further views. Well, unfortunately, Palestine is not online yet. Okay, Mr. Curtis.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that we've heard a number of states talk on the issue of transfer, but we've really only heard of the issue of transfer from the urgent safeguarding list to the representative list. There is in the document ideas that surround the encouragement of states who may wish, or communities particular, who may wish to actually transfer from a representative list to an urgent safeguarding list with the benefits of fast-tracked access to the ICH fund for implementing the safeguarding plan. So this would be rather different. We are all wary of the correlations with the 1972 convention listing mechanisms and the, let's say, the connotations put on the status of the list, where it's a status. But since the beginning in the 2003 convention, these two lists were not meant to be seen in that sense. And therefore, the experts thought, and we also thought it's interesting to also make the urgent safeguarding list somehow an attractive proposal for communities that may wish to garner attention, even if they're already on the representative list, by, for instance, making it a better guarantor of access to ICH funding through the international assistance mechanism of the fund. And if I may, I will remind that the fund of this convention has a much larger portion of it dedicated to international assistance to the benefit of safeguarding, because it is not being used for monitoring purposes. And this is just the mathematics of money, if you will. I would just wanted to point that out, Mr. Chair, if that's okay.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Curtis. Now, I recognize Colombia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor again. Just to join the Secretary in what he just said about the urgent safeguarding list, because in fact it's a very good idea, and we believe from Colombia that association with a so-called an extra help when you are kind of in trouble with your safeguarding is a very good idea. And just to have an example of the reference with the World Heritage Convention in Colombia, we voluntarily moved one of our elements to the list the endangered list, but actually it was a very good opportunity to improve our protection of the site, and it actually after moved back. So I think this approach is very positive, and we should support it, and we should move, as we said, or somebody said before, to make this urgent safeguarding list more dynamic and something that really can improve the safeguarding of our elements in urgent need of safeguarding. So thank you very much. And also, sorry, just to reiterate that Colombia really thinks that the observatory / arm's length platform, it's actually a very good idea, but we will be waiting for the details of its implementation to ensure that this wonderful idea takes the real sense of the intentions behind it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, Senegal, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est Monsieur le secrétaire de la Convention, Monsieur Curtis, qui a fait une intervention qui me fait reprendre la parole. Merci de me l'avoir donnée. Je pense effectivement que les biens inscrits sur la liste représentative, il faut aussi, dans le suivi, qu'on y prête attention. Parce que si on est inscrit sur la liste représentative, souvent c'est un prestige pour les États parties d'inscrire quelque part des biens, des éléments sur la liste représentative. Mais ensuite, personne ne s'en occupe quelquefois. On l'a dit dans les réunions d'experts que les communautés sont souvent déçues parce qu'on a parlé, on a développé des plans de sauvegarde avec ces communautés en disant après l'inscription, il y aura ça et ça et ça et ça. Finalement, ces communautés restent sur leur fin. L'État partie ne respecte pas forcément ses obligations parce qu'il n'en a pas les moyens. Et ce que disait M. Curtis tout à l'heure, permettrait un peu de résoudre ce problème. On est sur la liste représentative, mais on n'a pas la possibilité d'avoir les moyens de sauvegarde. Alors, pourquoi ne pas que la communauté elle-même, de manière positive, décide d'aller vers la liste de sauvegarde pour pouvoir bénéficier au moins de possibilités de mettre en œuvre les mesures de sauvegarde. Je pense qu'il faut l'envisager. Il faut l'envisager. Ça n'a rien à voir avec ce qui se passe sur la liste, sur la 72, où on vous met en péril parce qu'il y a ça et ça et ça et ça, et puis ça pose problème. Mais ici, ce serait peut-être une volonté des communautés qui attendent et qui veulent vraiment y aller. Je vous remercie.
I recognize a point of order from Kuwait. Ambassador Adam, what is the problem?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just because there is no English translation, so we couldn't understand what's the dear representative of Senegal. So please, if that can be fixed, and the dear representative of Senegal can repeat his comment after they fix the translation, or the interpreters, English interpreters, please.
Okay, have we gone back to normal?
Perhaps interpreters, I'm not listening to interpretation, but can we check with the interpreters, please?
Oui, si le président m'en donne l'autorisation,
okay.
Cher ambassadeur du Koweït, je peux bien prendre la parole et reprendre ce que j'ai dit. Monsieur le Président, est-ce que je peux y aller?
I have it.
Yes, for the benefit of the audience here, yes, please. Would you like? Could you repeat what you said? I'm sorry for that. But...
Je vais être bref. Je disais que l'idée émise, disons le commentaire de M. Curtis m'a amené à reprendre la parole sur la liste représentative. Les éléments qui sont inscrits sur la liste représentative méritent notre attention. Souvent, les États parties inscrivent des éléments sur la liste. C'est un prestige du pays, mais après, il n'y a rien. Dans la plupart des réunions d'experts, on a dit que souvent, les communautés disent qu'elles sont déçues. Elles attendaient beaucoup de choses parce qu'on a travaillé avec ces communautés sur des plans de sauvegarde après l'inscription. Et après, l'État partie n'a pas les moyens d'assurer les plans de sauvegarde. En tout cas, c'est ce qui se passe dans la plupart de certains cas en Afrique, que je connais moi. Alors, à partir de ce moment, on s'est dit, oui, pourquoi pas? Pourquoi les communautés elles-mêmes ne devraient pas, avec bien sûr les experts, dire nous voulons aller sur la liste de sauvegarde. Nous quittons la liste présentée pour aller sur la liste de sauvegarde pour avoir au moins les moyens de sauvegarder notre élément et de lui restituer sa viabilité. Et que ça ne soit pas quelque chose qui a été décidé comme dans la 72, où on va directement sur la liste en péril, mais ici, que ça soit une décision positive prise par les communautés parce qu'elles ont attendu un plan de sauvegarde, des mesures de sauvegarde que l'État partie n'a pas pu assurer. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Now, Cuba, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci à les collègues du Sénégal pour ces points. Mais dans tout cas, nous devons réfléchir un peu plus, justement parce qu'on ne peut pas oublier que c'est un mécanisme intergouvernemental aussi. Et on ne peut pas donner à la communauté que c'est très important que les communautés, ils peuvent réfléchir, ils peuvent prendre des actions concernant les sauvegardes des éléments, parce que c'est ça la question plus importante, l'esprit de ces conventions. Mais on ne peut pas oublier les institutions qu'à niveau national, ils font un travail pour sauvegarder les patrimoines immatériels. Je pense que chaque pays, il doit établir un mécanisme pour écouter les communautés, pour travailler avec la communauté, mais face à la convention et face les organes de la convention et les secrétariats, c'est l'État membre qui doit faire l'interlocution parce que ça c'est la nature de ces conventions, de cet instrument, et on ne peut pas oublier ça. Bien sûr, nous sommes tout à fait d'accord pour améliorer la participation des communautés dans ce sens, mais on ne peut pas oublier les rôles qui jouent les États membres dans ce sens. Et s'il y a des États membres qu'il n'y a pas de conditions pour faire d'une façon optimale son travail, les secrétariats, les fonds de la Convention, ils doivent prendre des mesures pour aider à certains pays qu'il n'y a pas de conditions pour travailler dans ce sens. Mais on ne peut pas dire, oui, on va donner à la communauté tous les pouvoirs pour directement travailler avec les organes de la Convention parce que nous sommes contre. On ne peut pas affecter, on ne peut pas mettre quelques problèmes concernant la nature intergouvernementale de ces instruments. Merci beaucoup.
Oh, really? Oh, I was just told that because English interpretation is perfect with us. But is there any delegation which has a problem with the English interpretation? If so, can you raise your hand? Or is it okay now? Okay, well, it seems that it's okay now. Okay, now, oh, yes, Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm gonna talk in English since maybe we had some problems with the translation. Just a quick remark, just to say that I agree with the Ambassador of Cuba. I think that the National Heritage Institutes cannot stay out of the process. I mean, the ideal situation would be to have a discussion which includes the community, the evaluation body, and of course the state members, delegations, and national heritage institutes. Everybody should take part on the discussion according to their specific role. That would be the idea, is to include everybody, not to leave apart the national heritage institutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, once again, I would like to ask you a couple of questions. Because I want to build I want to see where we are going from here. Now, first of all, let me talk about 3 points. One is the removal from the listing. Now, everybody has mentioned that we need a lot of caution, we need time, we need clear procedures, we might need interim process, and it has to be a dynamic process. So can we say at this moment that people realize the existence of this particular issue, but nonetheless, they want to take very cautious approach. And on that basis, we will think about what to draft. And that's one point. The second point is on the question of transfer. Yes, this can be a very helpful process in many ways. As many delegations pointed out, if enough protection is not extended to a particular element, there's a possibility that national commission or perhaps community, local community may wish to move their element from the representative list to the urgent safeguarding list. That is possible for more protection. And then if there's a good improvement, they can be moved back to the representative list. So this process, in a way, is a very constructive and helpful process. So in that sense, with more simplified procedure, this should be possible. And therefore, we will think about what can be done in that area in terms of simplification of the requirements for transfer and to think about a mechanism where this process can be used for very constructive purposes. Now, finally, on the question of arm's length platform, as I said earlier, nobody says this is a stupid idea. Nobody says this is a rubbish. So I think we have to build on that basis. We have to think about something on that basis. Now, arm's length platform is a useful element in terms of involving communities, local communities. But nonetheless, it doesn't mean that national entities should be excluded. No, no, no. The national entities should be there together with the local community and also experts. And therefore, on that basis, we should be able to think about more concrete proposals. And at the same time, this process may be useful in terms of the use of transfer from one list to another. Again, in the World Heritage Committee, the transfer from the one list to another can be an extremely big issue. But we don't have a same system here in this intangible heritage. No, sometimes moving from the representative list to the urgent safeguarding list is not a shame. It can be a way to extend more protection to the particular element. And therefore, this arm's length platform can be used very constructively for that purpose. So all in all, my take from today's discussion is that on the basis of the points made by state parties today, we will probably come up with a more concrete proposal so that people can have a more concrete discussions about this platform. I think this was a very useful discussion, and we can probably build on that. Those are the brief observations that I wish to make. And if yeah, yes, of course. Yes, of course. I received a message saying that NGOs are the useful partners here. Yes, yes, of course. So this arm's length platform is not an exclusive body. It is going to serve as a platform of exchanges of views, and therefore the intention really is for a good follow-up of already inscribed elements. Now, on that basis, we can probably go into more detailed discussions at a later stage, perhaps in September, because we will need to come up with more concrete suggestions for your consideration, and perhaps we can continue our discussions in September on those items. would that meet your expectations, or is there any delegation, is there any state member who wants to say otherwise? Ambassador of Cuba, please.
Merci, merci, merci le Président. Et oui, c'est concernant, on peut accompagner votre proposition, bien sûr, mais à notre avis, il n'y a pas encore un consensus sur la pertinence de cet organe indépendant qui va faire un suivi sur l'état de les nominations, mais à notre point de vue, c'est un travail qui peut faire aussi les secrétariats. On peut renforcer les capacités des secrétariats parce qu'aujourd'hui, pour arriver à les systèmes que nous avons aujourd'hui, que l'organe d'évaluation il est en composition équilibrée entre ONG et États membres, on avait passé beaucoup de temps pour arriver à cet mécanisme. Je ne sais pas, je suis sûre, en tant que Cubain, nous ne sommes pas sûrs de créer d'autres mécanismes de suivre pas résolu les problèmes. Peut-être nous devons ajouter quelques mandats à l'organe d'évaluation ou développer les capacités des secrétariats pour faire ces travaux dans le sens des ressources humaines. Mais nous sommes tout à fait d'accord pour continuer la réflexion, pour arriver au mois de septembre, pour avancer. Mais c'est très important que nous sommes encore dans un point de la discussion que nous ne sommes pas complètement convaincus de les valeurs de cette nouvelle proposition d'organes indépendants. Et bien sûr, nous sommes tout à fait d'accord que nous devons travailler un peu plus avec les ONG qui font un grand travail dans le cadre de ces conventions, que de plus en plus aussi les chefs UNESCO, ils font aussi avec les États membres. Merci, merci, merci le Président.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador. Yes, I fully recognize your discussions. We haven't come to a conclusion yet, but judging from the discussions today, they want to see more concrete proposals in trying to determine whether this is worth or not. So perhaps without having any preconditions, without having any prejudice, perhaps we could have more concrete, the elaboration of this particular proposal so that we can have a better understanding and also we can have a better basis for judgment. That is what I wanted to say. Okay, now we have Norway to be followed by Hungary. Norway, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question. I would like to have the proposal of transfer from the lists to the register to be included in the further proposal if we are supported on that. Because we think this is really good for the safeguarding to actually highlight the best or good safeguarding practice.
Yeah, indeed. Mr. Curtis, please.
Yes, indeed. Just to clarify, because I don't think I mentioned this enough in the presentation, but this was an idea circulating that elements that had been successfully safeguarded in the context of the urgent safeguarding list, those plans could be included, and those successful safeguarding plans and the activities that followed could be sort of automatically included as a good safeguarding practice in the register if it continues to be called a register. At the same time, so in that sense, an element that was successful in safeguarding its urgent safeguarding status would possibly, should the community want, go to the representative list, but at the same time, the safeguarding plan that would have been implemented could be recognized in the register as a good safeguarding plan. So in a way, and again, I think this is important to differentiate, if I may, from the implications of the 72 of the list in danger. In a way, an urgent safeguarding nomination can potentially lead to two forms of listings: going to the representative list, should the community desire, but also the action plan or the safeguarding plan that was successfully implemented would become, in itself, in the proposal there, a recognized good safeguarding practice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Do you have Hungary? I thought Hungary raised the hand. I cannot see it anymore. Okay. Now I recognize China to be followed by Barbados. China, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor again. Actually, we would like to just to make very brief comment on the idea of setting up a arm's length platform. We do believe this is a very interesting idea, and but we are quite also not very convinced about the feasibility of this idea. I would also like to echo the intervention by the ambassador of Cuba, and also as well as the representative of Brazil, that we believe the state party itself, as well as all the other actors or stakeholders related to the safeguarding of the elements, should take their appropriate role in the process of safeguarding the elements. And also, secondly, I would also take this opportunity to remind our dear colleagues of the ESCO principles for the safeguarding of the ICH, which refers to, I would like to refer to the paragraph 9, as well as paragraph 6. According to the paragraph 9, the communities, groups, and local, national, and transnational organizations and individuals should carefully assess the direct and indirect short-term and long-term potential and definitive impact of any action that may affect the viability of ICH or the community who practice it. And also the values of the ICH of the community should not be judged by the outsiders. So I would just mention these paragraphs of the ESCO principles for your kind consideration when we are talking about this possibility of set up this kind of body. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Now Barbados to be followed by Hungary. Barbados, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In your submission, you spoke to the issue of the cautious approach in terms of moving from the list. And I think in the earlier discussions, one of the concerns of members were moving from the list and going on to the Hall of Fame. And I think that progression needs to be flagged specifically in the discussion in terms of moving off of the list and into the Hall of Fame, since there were also some concerns in terms of when an item goes into the Hall of Fame, what happens next? And I think that in itself should form part of the discussion going forward. What happens when you just go on the list and stay in the Hall of Fame? Or is there some special provisions, some special actions that happens once you go into the Hall of Fame? And maybe some agreement if there actually needs to be a transition into a Hall of Fame, or what that transition looks like once you move off of the list. As well, I just want to give general support to the online platform. I think it's very useful in terms of follow through and to have more inclusion and discussion among the key stakeholders of communities. You added national entities and experts. And I think if you can have a space where all this discussion is happening before this follow through to the formal body, I think this would be really very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now Hungary, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Your excellent summary of the discussion before has prompted me a question. It regards the transfers from one list to the other. In fact, we are talking about possibility of multiple transfers among two lists and the register. My question would be, who can actually initiate such a transfer? Is it only the state party who initiates such a transfer? Can the committee itself initiate such a transfer? And the other question which comes with it is, who writes the file? Who will draft the file say, for example, if an element is transferred from the urgent list to the representative list, who will write the file for the representative list and who will write the file for the successful safeguarding plan for the register? Whose job is all this? Or is this something to be discussed already in September? Or can we raise these issues now? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Those are very interesting questions. Mr. Curtis, is there anything you can say?
I think these are really at the heart of the matter. I will just speak to the one experience we had of a transfer. And that one experience was, in a way, the experience that triggered the whole reflection process. And maybe we should go back to the operational directive. So when the first request for a transfer happened, it came from a state. And that request was then, we looked at the operational directives, which had some guidance on removal and some even less on transfer. It said there was the possibility of transfer without any indications of how it would occur. We treated them as literally as we could. And it was clear that the operational directives of the convention were drafted in a room on a theoretical basis and without any real application, at a time when all of the operational directives were being addressed. So we found that we had to first remove the element in the strict sense. First of all, we had to do a process of removing the element, and then we had to do a process of reinscribing the element. And the only information, then we presented it to the evaluation body. That's the only body we could find that was in a position to make that assessment. And the information for the removal was the information that was found in the periodic report, the 4-yearly periodic report. On that basis, it was decided whether to remove it, which they did, from the urgent safeguarding list, and then a new nomination file was submitted for reinscription on the representative list. And clearly this was a cumbersome, heavy procedure. The evaluation body was not very happy with it. The committee was not very happy with it, but we were following the operational directives, which had been written without practical experience. So clearly the need is there to simplify, and I think there are proposals on the matter of how to simplify. There's probably no need to rewrite multiple files in that sense, but there is a question of evaluation. At the moment, it could be the evaluation body, but the discussions of the time and the discussions of the expert meetings felt that there needed to be a better consideration, perhaps even sometimes missions, but then again, who would do them? So these discussions are complex discussions. One idea was this online platform to bring together all the stakeholders. There is an evaluation body which is composed equally of experts designated by states parties and experts presented from NGOs with an equal balance between the regions. So we don't have the answer to that. That is what we need to discuss. My only point to make would be that, if I may, I feel it's important to think outside of the box of the examples of the 1972 convention, which is expert-driven in a way, and with good reasons for the purposes of that convention. To visit a site or to assess the state of a site is a very different thing to assessing the viability of an element that is lived by communities. And therefore, we have this process to try to think perhaps also outside of the box. But the questions you have posed about who writes reports, does it need reports, does it need dialogue? These were issues that were brought up in the evaluation body, and these are issues that are up in the 4A part of this comment about, is it a report, or do we need also, can we make use of audiovisual technology for better understanding, and so on. So I think this reflection process is an opportunity to think a little bit out of the box, bearing in mind, of course, as has been mentioned by multiple delegations, that we are working in the framework of an intergovernmental convention, and that remains. But nevertheless, we have the opportunity to think in different ways. I can only say that because the questions you pose are actually core questions that we are facing as a secretariat in trying to make proposals on how to execute the transfer of an element from one list to another, or how to remove an element from the list. Thank you.
Okay, so we have about a bit less than 10 minutes to go. Now, let me a little bit reformulate what I said earlier. First of all, when we talked about removal of the list, we were talking about an element which has a serious problem in one way or another, or perhaps the local community no longer engaged in that particular element, or something like that. So, very cautious approach is necessary, but nevertheless, the need was recognized in that context. And then moving something from the representative list to the Hall of Fame is a different thing. This can happen even if nothing is lost in terms of the value of the element. So this is a different issue, but nonetheless, and I had an impression that this was not very popular. That was my impression. That is why I didn't propose to have further discussions on this one. But if the delegations want to pick it up, yes, we can continue our discussions. But the initial impression that I got, as I said, was delegations were very negative on that suggestion. So that's why I said that. But because there was a suggestion from Barbados on that, yes, we can continue talking about that. But nevertheless, the delisting, the removal from the list that I was talking about is a little bit different from that. Now, the question of arm's length platform, yes, we have to have certain caveat in mind. That is true. That is true. But nevertheless, this is one way of making use of modern technology to reduce the burdens of evaluation bodies and also the secretariat. Because setting up, for example, if you want to have a big presidential meeting, it might need something like 4, 5, 6 months to prepare. But if this is an online platform, online meeting, you need only 2 or 3 weeks to do it. So there's a clear difference in terms of the preparations for those meetings, and therefore, in a way, it's a good use of modern technologies to reduce the burdens. But at the same time, the question of national entities, yes, of course, it's there. This is not a proposal to circumvent the role of the national entities. It's not that. It's use of the modern technologies more than that. So with that caveat in mind, perhaps we should think about concrete proposals, concrete ideas regarding this body arm's length platform. And perhaps we can have more detailed discussions in September. And it is only after that we can determine the value of this new idea. Okay, that is, I just wanted to reformulate some of the points that I made earlier in that context. So at this moment, we don't see any hands raised. So if there is no delegation which wishes to take the floor at this stage, I would like to close this discussion today, and we will resume our discussions at 9:30 tomorrow, and we will deal with item 4D, methodology of the evaluation of nominations. And there, the priority item that I suggested earlier is the multinational files. So can I ask if there is any delegation who wishes to say something at this time with regard to 4C? Okay, I see none. So thank you very much, and I would like to close today's discussion, and let's meet at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Thank you very much, and good evening.